27 students abducted by bandits from the Federal College of Forestry Mechanization, Kaduna State, have been released. Their release has come shortly after protests this past Tuesday at the National Assembly in Abuja by parents and relatives of the students. Early reports suggest that their release was facilitated by Sheikh Ahmed Gumi dialogue with support from former President Olusegun Obasanjo. The kidnapping of students have become a menace in northern Nigeria, with more than 600 students abducted since December 2020.
We can confirm to you that the remaining students of Federal College of Forestry Mechanization are here with us. Like you know, they need to undergo a thorough medical examination. But by the special grace of God, we will meet you tomorrow, Thursday, for a detailed briefing.
All right, we'll chat on this. Tundu, your comment on this?
I'm so happy for these students. These are the lucky ones. A lot of other people who are abducted never see the light of day. I'm happy for them and I'm happy for their families. The 55-day ordeal is over. However, it must be stressed. The news story that was just read mentioned that they protested at the National Assembly. The National Assembly, from reports that we have currently, had nothing to do with their release. Nobody in the government had anything to do with their release. What we're told so far is that there was some kind of intervention by the controversial cleric, Sheikh Gumi, and he was supported by a former president. So all these are extra governmental interventions that resulted in this release. And that, for me, is the striking detail that we need to look at now. Their release had nothing to do with security agencies. Their release had nothing to do with intelligence. It had to do with negotiating with bandits. And we've said before, well, I certainly have, that the point of negotiating with bandits is that it emboldens them. It does. We're not sure if ransom was paid at this point, but I doubt that it wasn't. There has to be some kind of pecuniary advantage, because that's what these people want. So it does, even though I'm happy for them, these are the lucky ones, but I'm wondering who's going to be next. Because all this is doing is making them realize that the government can do nothing, either to prevent or to rescue people when they're kidnapped. We are on our own. We just are.
Okay, first, the point you raised about ransom and the skepticism you expressed about whether or not ransom was paid. Well, I mean, I agree with you, but we have no details in that regard.
No.
And that has been part of the controversy with regard to the release of these remaining students of the School of Forestry Mechanization in Kaduna, who were abducted on March 11 and who spent about 55 days with their abductors. Now, the controversy is about a certain 800,000 naira that was purportedly collected on behalf of Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, who we're told was involved in the process of getting these students released. And he has said that he never asked anybody to collect any 800,000 naira. And in fact, one newspaper from the north, Desert Herald, has reported that Sheikh Gumi was so angry that he says he will not again grant interview to newspapers from the southern part of Nigeria, because he was blaming southern newspapers for being the promoters of that piece of news. Well, I hope Sheikh Ahmed Gumi knows that it will look untidy for him to say he will not talk to southern newspapers, considering the role that he plays. Okay, if he doesn't talk to newspapers in the south of Nigeria, will he talk to VOA Hausa Service or BBC Hausa Service? But that is an aside. I think everybody is relieved. The forum of parents of abducted students of the school, they created a forum. They had an association. We congratulate them on the efforts that they had made. Before now, some of those students, 10 of those students, originally they were 39, 10 of them were released after the parents paid 17 million. So that's why I agree with you that perhaps some money was paid. So we also want to commend all the persons who took part in it. Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, we were told, was part of it. General Olusegun Obasanjo, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, as in our east, we were told also intervened in the process of getting these persons released. And that's not a problem, really. You know, it's not a comment on the ability of government, because government itself, under their new security strategy, talked about whole of government approach, whole of society approach. Yeah. So here, government may have failed, but private individuals and parents, they've taken the initiative. And I read a report saying that President Buhari has congratulated the families, you know, the students and other persons who took part in it. But I hope that in issuing that congratulatory note, it will be a subtle reminder to both the president and the governor of Kaduna State, who were told played no part at all in this matter, that, well, if individuals are now helping themselves, it's a subtle reminder that government is failing the people.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's a subtext to that whole of government, whole of society approach. I mean, it's government that has the instruments. It's government that has the resources. To what extent can the people always have to solve their own problems when they have government and leaders in positions, in place, you know, who are supposed to, activate, operationalize the oaths of office that they have taken? But as human beings, okay, yes, we are all happy, but we need to remind government that we cannot continue to leave the safety of Nigerian students to chance. Okay, the students of the College of Forestry Mechanization, AFACA, they are out now. We are all happy. But there's still the unresolved matter of the students of Greenfield University who have been in detention, who have been in captivity for about 2 weeks now. And the tragic part of it is that one Sani Jalingo has threatened that if they don't get 100 million naira and 10 Boko Haram Honda motorcycles, that those students will be slaughtered. Now, that is something that government should focus upon. On this program yesterday, we were saying, look, it doesn't even matter, seriously. What matters more is not about negotiation, it's not about ransom. We just want those students of Greenfield University to return. Look at the very painful, frustrating part of it. Look at those students on that video that was shown. Look at how they were looking. I mean, nobody should go through that kind of a trauma. And I hope that the necessary counseling and support services will be deployed to, assist those students who have been traumatized, who have gone to hell and back. I hope that will not be too difficult for the government of Kaduna State and the federal government of Nigeria.
I want to just say about Sheikh Gumi, that report of the 800,000 naira was disowned by the group of Afaka parents. They said it's somebody claiming to be a parent
they said one
who
woman.
said that, yes, one person. So they've kind of disowned her and have been very gushing in confirming that Sheikh Gumi did not ask for that amount of money.
Right, thank you both for your views this morning. We just pray for the best for our country. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotosudiri, Michael Wilson, Adeso Mora to give us updates on Africa, global business, and COVID-19 pandemic across the globe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's quickly go over to Rotus. Rotus, how's it going, my friend?
Doing fine, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. We kick off with the Central Bank had a fair, promoting financial stability and economic development. And they were lamenting low Southeast credit patronage, according to the Central Bank. This is according to the Acting Director, Corporate Communications Department of the Central Bank, Mr. Osita Nwanisobi. He was saying that the patronage from some of the southeastern southeastern states was not as much as they would like compared to businesses, agricultural businesses in the northern parts of the country. He pointed to the low turnout at this particular fair. The fair was meant to tell businesses in the southeast that, look, the central bank has put a lot of intervention schemes out there, credit facilities for you to take advantage of to build your business. So, come and get this money and get assistance. So, but, I don't know, comparing southeastern businesses to agricultural businesses in the north, I'm not sure if that's a a proper comparison. When you look at the special reports we had yesterday on the apprenticeship program in the Southeast, where a business owner gives X amount of credits to his apprentice who's worked with him for some time, and then he now goes and starts his own business. If you look at all the businesses that were profiled in that special report, a lot of them were, tech, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure if comparing them with the northern part of the country, where primarily agricultural, and there's also the level of, I guess, more industrialization in the east compared to the fact that, and then poverty levels, and then also payback. I mean, we'd have to look at stats to see exactly how many of those loans that Mr. Uwanisobi said are taken from the northern agricultural businesses are actually paid back. Because when you take a loan for a lot of these southeastern businesses, it is to invest, start a business, and then pay it back, right? If they're getting it from the central bank. But if you look at where the businesses are, the economic trajectory, and so on and so forth, I don't know any business that would turn down an intervention facility, considering the fact that the facilities are at single-digit rates. At least they've been pushed to another year, in February, March 2022, by the central bank, where you can get intervention funds of like 5%. And they extended these interventions to assist households and businesses and so on. So, again, interesting comments coming from Mr. Osita Uwanisobi. We move to the federal government. The federal government of Nigeria has approved its National Poverty Reduction Growth Strategy document, which is premised on a number of pillars: macroeconomic stability, industrialization. They even started a fund that is supposed to be investing in a number of businesses in order to unlock growth. According to the federal government, this was necessitated by the fact that there's been rising inflation and poverty. Now, remember there was there was an economic sustainability plan of about 2 trillion or so, which wasn't fully implemented. This is a 10-year plan, and it's supposed to cost about $1.6 trillion over 10 years. The Buhari administration is going to be leaving in less than 2 years. So what are the odds that if it's not an APC-led government in 2023, what are the odds that that government is going to continue that poverty reduction strategy, especially with a price tag of 1.6 trillion? Again, it's easy to write these things down. The issue with Nigeria has always been implementation. And I think a number of people are going to be a bit unsettled that this was brought out as a result of rising inflation and rising poverty. That's been going on now for a long number of years. So the key thing is, this is not the first time the government has put out a poverty reduction strategy. President Buhari's plan to lift 100 million people out of poverty over the X amount of years, with him again leaving in 2 years, that's up in the air, but the document is out. And again, this is also assisted by advice from the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Mr. Makarwani is there, doing Salami is a member there, where they've said to unify the exchange rate, try to bring inflation down to single digits, so on and so forth. Again, with Nigeria, the plans are always there. It's about implementation. A research report from Nairametrics looking at the top 30 most capitalized companies in Nigeria showed that, and this isn't really of a surprise, but corporate travel dropped by about 36%, or 36.9%, roughly 37% in 2020. Only a number of companies saw their corporate travel. And when you talk about corporate travel, you're talking about flight tickets, private jets, hotel accommodations, and so on and so forth. Guinness saw a rise of 283%, Nascon Allied Industries and Presco. On the other side, those are three companies whose corporate travel expenses increased in 2020. On the other side, MTN saw an 80% drop. Stanbic IBTC also saw a 60% drop. The pandemic, of course, being blamed. Video conferencing now. It's going to be interesting to see where spending is. By the way, the spending was 49.5 billion in 2019. It fell to about 31.2 billion in 2020, corporate travel. How's that going to work out for 2021? More people now are using video conferencing, cutting out having to travel for meetings and so on and so forth. So it will be very interesting to see exactly what the expenses are like. This was again based on the top 30 most capitalized businesses in the country. Not all of them disclosed their travel expenses, but majority of them did. Great.
I mean, Rotus, great insight. And there's a science to the madness about the Southeast not getting a lot of credit from the CBN. Number one, we need to look at, the ways at which they can get the credit. Access to the credit is a big problem. I mean, we had a farmer come on this show saying to get credit, even the anchor borrower scheme was quite a very Herculean task. So maybe more advertisement, more education should be done as regards getting credit. But secondly, I think for me the most important point would be the credit culture. Have you ever wondered why Germany have one of the biggest current account surplus in the world? It's because of its credit culture.
Right.
In Germany, I hear that the word for debt also means sin in Germany.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's why you hardly see a German go into debt. They have a very strong current account base. A lot of them save money. And that's equally the culture in the East. They have that apprenticeship system like you talked about, that they put money around. I mean, I'm trying to do a study now that looks into the fact that an Igbo man retains money 3 times more than people from other parts of the country. Because you see, they circulate credit, they put it in systems and schemes like apprenticeship system, they give each other credit, and they do credit facilities, they give each other buyer credit and the likes. So the credit still circulates across the mile. And that's why you can see that states like Anambra have one of the lowest unemployment rates. And these are not federally created jobs.
Right.
They are factories out of Nnewi. They are people creating jobs in their own community because they can spread that credit around. So I think it's pretty much about the credit culture, and they've been able to build that frugal culture. But the CBN needs more awareness, more education,
right,
and make the processes easier.
Correct.
It's one thing to say, come take money. It's another thing to make the process easier so that people can take money.
Well said.
Well, very quickly, I think with the Southeast, you'll recall that there was a day Ifene brought a story, which he pointed out, a newspaper report, that persons in the East were complaining about being marginalized under the Anchor Borrowers Program and other credit initiatives, other palliatives provided by the Central Bank of Nigeria in the context of COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
And, I tried at the time to say, well, from the reports provided by the CBN governor, it was clear that there was a national, spread, national distribution of the support that had been provided. But what, the acting director of communications has done now is more or less to now blame the people, to say that it's the people who are not accessing the credit. Whatever it is, any kind of support that is provided by the Nigerian government should be equitable, should go around to everybody.
Right.
Whether they have a credit, a wealth creation, informal, traditional system in the Southeast or not, does not matter.
Right.
What is important is that every Nigerian should have, free access,
right,
to whatever is provided for government, by government, to prevent a situation whereby any part of the country will talk about marginalization.
Right.
I mean, I'm surprised. The director of corporate communications, he said, people from the north are accessing the credit facilities. Okay. I mean, you will expect that given the structure of commerce in the country, that a person from the southeast will in fact be more interested, because Southeasterners, well, even if we don't back it up with the facts, are more into commerce and entrepreneurship than other parts of the country.
Correct.
Now, as for the 10-year 2021 to 2031, 1.6 trillion project, you say, it's based on certain pillars. I looked at those pillars coming from the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. I don't see anything that is new there.
Oh, same here.
Right.
It's like copying from the Nigerian Economic Summit group and saying these are pillars. The NESG says the same thing every year. I think, however, that where the challenge is in terms of the basic details that they provided and how they are going to deal with that. The Advisory Council is talking about a unified exchange rate. Are we going to get that? Right. The Advisory Council is talking about sustainable debts and making sure that we can manage our debts. Are we going to get that?
Right.
They are talking about a single-digit inflation rate. Is that going to descend from the sky? Okay. And then they talk about market-determined rates. Now, market-determined rates, how would that affect us as Nigerians? Who will be at the mercy of economic forces, of market forces. So these are the basic challenges. I don't see anything new there. And then the money, 1.6 trillion. Where is that going to come from?
Right.
And then you raise the question about continuity. Continuity should be the norm from one government to the other, where we don't always see it.
Well, you've made my point here, Dr. Abati. There's no point repeating it. I looked at the 4 pillars and was waiting for something new. I did not get anything new. Right. And then I looked at the strategy for implementation. Same old, quite frankly. I'm not trying to poo-poo the government's efforts, but it's most uninspiring. It's repetitive, recycled, and let's just see action taken for once. Another day, another government plan. Where is the implementation? Where are the dividends that we can actually feel?
Well said.
I mean, I think most importantly, good thinking, they say, brings good product, isn't it, Rotus?
Exactly, that's correct.
I think the Japanese have a saying for it. They say, Yoshina Yoikangai. So I think that should be the motto in all of this. Yoshina Yoikangai. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you, Rotus. Move on to Michael. Michael joins from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. China and Japan back from holiday, and basically traders came in through the door and pressed the buy button. So a little bit of an increase there. China more subdued. The People's Bank of China withdrew 40 billion of what it had put in for holiday liquidity money, i.e. to keep the markets going via the repo market. That was over the holiday, about five or 6 day holiday. So Asia Pacific stock market is looking fairly mixed this morning. It's really all about the US jobs report tomorrow, and should be about a figure of about 1 million. If it is, that will keep everybody happy. We'll talk about inflation slightly later on. As far as monetary policy is concerned, very interesting, isn't it, that now the Federal Reserve Vice Chairman has said there needs to be considerable progress, i.e. in employment, before they'll pull back from the COVID measures that they put in, which means that they will start tapering QE, but not until there's a huge improvement in the jobs market. So that's kicking that particular can right down the road. As far as China's concerned, here's an interesting one for you. Tencent held its negotiating agreements with US National Security Panel to keep ownership in the United States of its video game developers, Riot Games and Epic Games. It's been in talks for quite a while, and the problem that the US has with this is they feel as though Tencent is using its users' data in the United States and worries about it for Chinese ownership, and therefore worries about a security risk. So US stocks recap then. Dow at a record once again, gained 97 points. The interesting thing is that what's happening in the US markets, now here's one for you. I reported yesterday about the tech stocks being sold off. Well, they've moved into financials now. When markets move into financials, that tends to, not all the time, it tends to illustrate the fact that they're looking at rapid recoveries of economies. And adding to that, you remember I reported about Janet Yellen talking about interest rates and inflation. So she rode back on that. I've got a couple of things to say about that. She rode back on that. Various Fed governors have been also quieting down what she said. The thing about Treasury secretaries, they're politicians. They're not. Remember that the person who decides interest rates in the United States, or the people who decide it, is the Federal Open Markets Committee. It's nothing to do with the Treasury secretary. I think that Janet Yellen is slightly moving too much with the mouth and not enough with what she's actually doing. It's probably a learning curve because she's not been in this position before, even though she was a very well-respected chairwoman of the Federal Reserve. Anyway, that's it. And I was talking to some big players yesterday who were saying exactly the same thing, that Janet should have kept it zipped, quite honestly, as far as inflation and interest rates are concerned. You're going to be talking about this, I know, later on, about the progress of the pandemic around the world. The US, as you know now, has backed its support behind a WTO, World Trade Organization, initiative to waive intellectual property patents on vaccines. India and South Africa proposed that move, and the US Trade Representative, they've done a U-turn here. The Trade Representative is saying we actually need they're extraordinary times, so we need extraordinary measures. I'll come on to India in a moment, because I think those kind of problems are underlying a lot of what's going on. But just for the moment, Facebook has kept the Trump ban, but for now. In other words, what that oversight committee that we were talking about yesterday, the Facebook, has actually pushed the problem straight back onto Facebook management. It'll be interesting to see what they actually do. We were wondering what Twitter might be doing. Well, not so much about banning people. What Twitter are doing is preaching good manners. It says nasty replies on Twitter will require a little more thought to send. If the algorithm in Twitter suggests that you're being slightly insulting in a message, it'll be saying things to you like, are you sure you want to send that? Would you like to think about rephrasing that? And all those kind of questions. It's nanny writ large, isn't it? I mean, you know, if you want to get on social media, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. I was talking to one of my commentators this morning. She's actually been imitated as far as Twitter's concerned. Somebody's taken control of her person and her personality and started trolling bad messages, which she said is very, very difficult to get Twitter to take down. Keep Fit craze, Peloton recalling thousands of treadmills. Now, here's the thing. So what they did was there was an injury to a child as far as Peloton. It's really racked the share price of the company. What they did was they poo-pooed what the US health administrator had actually said, the watchdog. Now they've said, yes, I'm sorry about this. And they're recalling thousands of them. Lesson number one, you want to work in a consumer society, you get a complaint, you act on it straight away. The classic example for that is Perrier, which didn't do that years ago. That's why you've got lots of different fizzy mineral waters on your dinner table and in your supermarkets, because Perrier chucked away leadership in the market because they didn't react quickly enough to complaints about something wrong with their water. Subsequently was found to be something wrong and they regretted it and lost a huge amount of production. Let's move on to India. The COVID crisis could cripple global growth. I know that the problems in India are very domestic at the moment, but experts are warning about a number of things. First of all, shipping costs are suffering because ports are refusing to take container ships now with Indian crews, and they've extended that ban to crews from Pakistan and Bangladesh, which, as you know, comprise a lot of shipping crews. 80% of the world's trade is carried on ships. A prolonged outbreak in the country could also hinder the production of vaccines, which we actually need. And that will also affect developing countries which depend upon those vaccines being delivered to them. So all in all, these continuing outbreaks in India are not just confined to India. They're having a global effect right now, not just about the personal side of things, but also about economies as well. And not least of which, a lot of US companies hire millions of Indian workers to run their back office operations. Same here. Same if you report a fault on our telephone service or your computer, you're likely to get back office reply from Mumbai rather than domestically. Let's turn our attention to the UK. Shares up, biggest rise in 2 months. Miners, it's a recovery by this. Lots of people going into miners, iron ore expectation, copper and so on. We've touched on copper before. When you see that kind of shift in people's investment intentions, it means they're buying into recovery. Bank of England meets today. No change on interest rates, no change on QE, but the interesting thing is going to be their view on where they think the economy is going. So revisions of growth figures will be interesting there. As far as the UK is concerned as well, no return to the office for over 1 million workers. 50% of Britain's biggest employers have said it will be hybrid. There will be no change. People will not be going back to the office. If you remember JP Morgan saying yesterday, Jamie Dimon had been saying that they lost business because they didn't go face-to-face with their customers. Goldman Sachs is joining that too. UK pump prices. What we talk about pump prices, we look at the wholesale price of oil and say that prices go up like a rocket and down like a feather. Always been the same. It's that complete contrast that you get between wholesale prices and retail prices. Why? Because petrol stations don't make any money. They only make money out of selling food and drinks and things that have got shops attached to them, and therefore they rook the motorists. And finally, oil, yes, touching on $70 a barrel, but slightly weaker this morning, just messing around, and gold really not moving at all. That's your global view.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Yes, I remember that contamination issue that Perrier had, and that was that for their market share. But I wanted to ask for your perspective on the row with UK and France and Jersey, with Jersey changing their fishing laws and the HMS Severn and HMS Tamar patrolling Jersey waters. What's going on there? And also your perspective on Australia and China ratcheting up the tensions. Your thoughts?
Right. First of all, Australia and China, yeah, they will do that. And Australia will not blink. And Australia's losing a huge amount of money as far as iron ore is concerned, as far as its wines are concerned as well. That's a trade war developing. That's keeping going. Jersey. OK, right, look, I'm not a politician. I'll tell you this about Jersey. So the Nazis invaded Jersey at the beginning of the war. They didn't cut off its electricity. France is saying it's going to do that as a final resort to this. All this is about is Jersey is allowing French fishermen into its waters. It has to do that. All the French fishermen have to do is to fill in licenses to be able to do that. That's the post-Brexit negotiation. The French are keen on paperwork. They're not keen on paperwork having to fill it in for other countries. As far as cutting off electricity is concerned, I found that quite extraordinary. I'm glad that a couple of gunboats have gone there to actually show some kind of force. It's totally disproportionate to what's going on. The authorities in Jersey have said, fill in the licenses. 17 of the operators, I think there are 30 fishing operators from France. 17 of them have filled them in absolutely fine. The others are saying the forms are a bit too complicated. I'm sorry. No. This is ludicrous. And it's sort of saber-rattling. What it does show is that the French aren't afraid to go straight down to confrontation instead of diplomacy, which is not the way of the world.
Well, Catherine Tai, that's the U.S. Trade Representative, gave very exciting news when she disclosed yesterday that the U.S. is now willing to support the demand led by India and South Africa, that there should be a democratization of access to patents and intellectual property rights in order to ramp up global production. Well, I think that's a major moment in the battle to get vaccines across to as many people as possible and ensure equity. But the Association of Pharmaceutical Companies, they are adamant. The pharmaceutical companies are adamant. They are saying that the issue here is not about patent. It's about manufacturing capacity. And Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, has consistently complained about vaccine appetite. Okay, how do you think this is going to be resolved, considering the fact that, it won't happen overnight just because the U.S. has put its big support behind the need for, democratization of access under the trade rules, WTO rules. That's one. The second one has to do with copper. Copper has become, wed now. Some guy leading the American economy says it has become the new oil. How? And he's projecting that it could be as much as about $30,000 per ton by the end of this year. So I wanted your comment on that.
Right. First of all, copper. Yeah, that's totally about that. We spoke about this, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? Yes, it is. It is the new oil. I think, though, it will continue to be used. There's a question mark over whether oil will continue to be used. I think what the new oil they're talking about means that the price will actually increase. I think it was rather not a very good comparative call, quite honestly. It's not like oil. What it is it's actually being used it's going to be used in electric cars. It's used in everything to do with recovering economies. So yes, the price will increase. Copper production may well increase. I hope that some of the copper producing countries actually make some money for their own citizens out of the partnerships that they already have with copper extracting companies within their countries. As far as democratization is concerned, yeah, it's a great move, isn't it? But the problem is, as I was saying, that you've got countries like India, for example, producing a lot of these drugs. Now, what's going to happen to that drug production if their own COVID problems overtake them? We understand that in India, their health services are swamped. I wouldn't like to be working in one of their factories right now, even if it were within the anaesthetic in the anaesthetic and very healthy environment of a vaccine producing company as well. That will probably hold. So I think that, yes, it's good that the countries like the United States and the rest of the developed world are actually trying to help other countries. We've said this before on the programme, haven't we, that that's the way forward. I think the real problem is going to be getting those drugs to people, and also making sure that drug production continues.
All right, thanks so much for that, Michael. Real quickly, I want you to get me an update on G7, please. What's happening? There's some talks about economic recovery. Is anything possible, with what is happening in India? Just last week, the Economist magazine was bullish about recovery. Anything? Have you heard on the sidelines of the G7 meeting?
Haven't seen anything from the G7 this morning in particular. The growth figures for India were extraordinary, weren't they? We're talking 14% growth this year. Well, that clearly isn't going to happen. That'll be the difference. I think that given most of it's now virtual, we may get something later in the day. I personally am only interested in trade and trade deals and how we can get more cooperation about that. Geopolitically, that's a concern for political analysts, and I'm not an expert in that.
That's not your brief anyway. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you for your time, Michael, as always. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Moro is here, but they'll be with us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Body Show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's quickly go straight to Adeso Moro for updates on COVID-19 pandemic. Adeso, great to have you.
Thank you, Rufai. Good morning. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati. Well, the COVID-19 has killed more than 3.2 million people and infected nearly 155 million others globally. India continues to shatter those records. It reported 3,980 deaths and 412,000 infections today in the country. And that's the highest daily death and infection toll since the pandemic began. According to the World Health Organization, India has now accounted for 1 in 4 deaths across the world over the last week. The country has also reported 46% of global cases in the past week. And there are growing calls for that national lockdown in India, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi will not budge. And despite the increasing travel bans on India, let me tell you that Kenya has become the latest on a growing list of countries to detect the variant thought to be responsible for the spiraling situation in India. Over 17 countries have now recorded that very troubling variant in India. Here in Nigeria, 53 new infections were recorded, with Taraba State posting the largest infections, followed by the nation's capital, the Federal Capital Territory. Vaccination continues in some states across Nigeria. Based on the data by the NPHCDA, which you have on your screen, very slow vaccination activity are currently ongoing in Sokoto, Taraba, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, and Anambra states. And you spoke with Michael moments ago about this, Dr. Abati in particular, the waiver of intellectual property rights to ramp up vaccine production. That support coming from the U.S. Is a great one. Let me actually bring an update because the WHO Director General has responded. He describes it as a monumental moment in the fight against COVID-19, and of course, he's praising the leadership of the U.S. And as you have said, Dr. Bassett, this will not happen at the snap of the fingers. We also have many countries who have pushed against this in the past. The EU, the UK, Japan, Switzerland, Brazil, and Norway are just a few of those countries that also need to get on board. And of course, pharmaceuticals are not happy about this move. For them, it is beyond the intellectual property rights. It's production, it's capacity, it's the skills, and of course, it's even the raw materials. And they say this just can't happen. Well, moving on, Canada has become the first country in the world to approve a COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 12 to 15. Dr. Supriya Sharma, who's the Chief Medical Advisor for Health Canada, confirmed the approval, and she affirmed the safety of the vaccine in that age group. Canada has seen about 20% of coronavirus cases documented in people younger than 19. For a lot of people, they say young people don't get sick with the coronavirus. Yes, they don't, but they are carriers. And scientists have said for any country to actually reach herd immunity, you need to consider these young people who do not fall sick but can pass on the virus to the very old, fragile population. So it is critical to include them in the vaccination drive. And talking about first, we have seen vaccination incentives across the world, but this will be the world's first country-wide cash for jab scheme. I'm talking about Serbia. Serbia is to offer $30 cash to each citizen who gets COVID-19 vaccine. And the country's president, Alexander Vučić, says the country wants to reward people who show responsibility. Currently, only a little over 1 million people have been vaccinated out of the population of about 7 million people in the country. And finally, the World Health Organization experts yesterday revealed that the COVID-19 vaccine produced by China's Sinovac Biotech is efficacious in preventing COVID-19 in adults under 60. But some quality data on the risk of serious adverse effects is lacking. Now, the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts, otherwise called the SAGE Group, reviewed the CoronaVac jab from phase 3 clinical trials in 3 countries, actually 5 countries, beg your pardon, in China, Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, and Chile. Now, this assessment of CoronaVac comes just days after the same group, the SAGE Group, voiced very low confidence in another vaccine produced by China, this time around by the state-owned Sinopharm vaccine. In that case, SAGE was saying that there was not enough data as well to show the risk of serious side effects in some patients. Now, it's not clear what effect this review by the SAGE Group would have on vaccine usage across the world, but currently, Sinovac CoronaVac has been authorized in 32 countries and jurisdictions with about 260 million doses distributed so far.
Ades, are you surprised that we're having data transparency issues with Sinovac? I'm not. But I wanted to talk about Serbia. That's so interesting to me. You'll recall that even the Vatican made moves to compel its residents to be vaccinated with limited success. So now Serbia is actually putting money into it. So desperate times call for desperate and expensive measures, because I was looking at the population of Serbia and estimating, let's say the adult population is around half, which it's not, I'm being conservative. 4 million people times $30, we're looking at $120 million to get people. Maths. I had to do the math because I was thinking, how much is this going to cost? So I don't think that model will be adopted in other countries, I have to say. But I think that it's a really great idea just to get the population healthy and we finally beat this virus.
Yes.
As for Pfizer, and now we have children between 12 and 18 being included, that's also great news. And it's important that a lot of advocacy is done in that regard, because somebody was telling me to read this report, and she actually believed it, a highly educated person, saying that if you've been vaccinated, you should avoid pregnant women because your vaccinated body can cause complications for the unborn child. An educated person really believe that. So I don't know how many people are going to actually send their 12-year-old, their tweens and their teens to be vaccinated. So much work needs to go into that to ensure that that uptake is done.
I totally agree with you, because people in those age group cannot give their own authorization. They need their parents' consent, and so that's an issue there.
Well, on Serbia, Serbia may be the first country to have this nationwide incentive. But you recall, you yourself brought the story the other day, how in Detroit, in the United States, people were being given as much as, is it $50? If they help to take people to vaccination centers.
Yes.
In West Virginia, also in the United States, there is a $100 savings bond for students, young adults, who decide to take the vaccine. In New York City and Washington, if you took the vaccine, there were places where you would be given rolled joints of marijuana,
yes,
as a form of encouragement. So now we have Serbia taking that move, making that move as some kind of national policy. 3,000 dinars, they call it. You translate that is $30. And it's to ramp up the vaccination process in that country. But it's a double-edged sword. Poor people will jump at all of these incentives. They will take marijuana. They will take a free beer, as was reported in some other places. But people who don't need that $30 are likely to be a bit skeptical. Yeah. They'll be wondering, okay, if the vaccine is for my own good, why do you have to pay me to take it? Is it possible that you are trying to use me to promote a particular experiment? But let us see how it works out. 1.3 million persons in Serbia out of 7 million population have taken the vaccine. Let us see how this works out. And my question for you is, okay, do you think that Nigeria should follow that example? Because if you offer an average Nigerian an incentive I mean, the entire population may end up being vaccinated.
Well, maybe not $30 because we obviously cannot afford it, and I'm sure Rotus has told you this over and over again. But some sorts of incentives may just work the magic. You never can tell.
Yeah. This one, for me, I like to celebrate Botswana. We can talk about all the great countries doing great things as regards COVID-19, but Botswana is the only country that has ordered enough vaccine for its population, for its adult population in Africa as we speak today. And why can't they do that? Because there's a great sense of leadership. President Mosisi has been leading on this. They have learned from HIV/AIDS. And lastly, they have a great wealth fund called the Puna Fund, where they can take money off a sovereign wealth fund where they can use to develop their population. So we should learn from Botswana. But thank you so much for your time at this one.